Alright, I'm streaming. I'm here to take any questions, comments, and concerns, big issues that people might have. So, if anyone out there saw my recent debate, had any questions, had any concerns, thinks I'm you know, a brain dead partisan hack, let me know. I'd love to hear it. What you have to think, any concerns, any thoughts, any questions. I'm doing an early stream. We'll see how long I'm doing this. But, I'm just curious if anyone has any. Just curious to see what we got. Oh, this is an online game. This is a bad idea. Interesting. That's okay. We'll figure that out. But yeah, if anyone has questions, problems, let me know. I would love to hear from people who. I would love to hear from the people who think I'm a partisan liberal hack. That's good. That's interesting. We can chat about that. But any concerns? Anything you got? Let me know. Just to see if anyone different is around at this time. I had a great stream last night, but it was with too many fans, too many supporters. So I'm looking for disagreements. Any disagreements you got with my recent debate, my posts? Let me know. Let me know what you got. Also, if you have any pet issues you want to bring up, discuss, that's totally okay too. I like discussing things. Big fan. We love discussions on this channel. That's all we do. That's what we just discuss a lot. Okay, this was a really horrible idea for my connection. That's fine. So, if anyone out there has an issue with, anyone has any questions, wants to push me live, debate me live, put their comments in a live format. You'd love to hear it. Okay, be very interested. Yes, you can. Absolutely. That's really what we're talking about. Is the recent conversation with Doug. So yeah, whatever you've got, happy to hear it. Let me know. I'd love to hear what you think. And that goes for everyone. We're really here. That's really what we're talking about. I mean, let's be honest. That's what we're all here to talk about. The Doug conversation. That's really what's on everyone's minds. So, but yeah, let me know. Whatever you've got. Okay. What should have been discussed was the intentions behind the technicalities of facts and claims in the Russiagate debate. Doug is trying to hold. Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly what you mean when you say intents behind technicalities, but I mean that could mean a bunch of different things. I can see where you're going with that. Um, I think the problem was that, and maybe you don't, like, maybe you are genuine in that endeavor. I think you're trying to have a different debate than I can have with Doug, basically. Because I don't think Doug is really trying to hold the state accountable. I think he is trying to hold the state accountable in like a partisan manner, and that's kind of my issue. And that's where the facts matter to me. So I'm totally okay with having a conversation. Like, for example, so I ended the conversation by saying, listen, if they did this to someone in Clinton's campaign, I'd be okay with that, or I would understand it. I didn't even say I'd be okay with it, or I did say I would be okay with it. I mean, but really the point I'm making there is that that's like function of the deep state. That's how the liberal order works. And if you want to have a conversation about whether that should happen in the first place, I'm totally okay with having that conversation about like what are the effects of the state operating this way? Like, what are we really dealing with? Like, I'd be totally fine having a conversation like that. I just think that's not the kind of conversation we were having there. Because really, Doug is not saying the state should. Because I think the way you can see that this is the case is that Doug didn't, like, Doug was, like, shocked that I made that argument at the end. He was, like, confused. Like, he didn't understand how that all, like, fit together. Because for him, it's more about the intentions of specific people and bias against Trump. It's all about Trump, and it really comes off more as like defending Trump's position rather than critiquing the state. Because I'm perfectly happy to have a conversation about that, but I just think that was not discussed at all, and that I don't think that was like I just don't think that was ever up for debate when because he didn't even want to admit. Because remember, his argument was not that the FBI does this and it should be prevented from doing that, or we should critique it. His argument was that the FBI doesn't do this. It was partisan in doing this thing, right? He said he actually put forth the argument that this was unique. He actually put forth the argument that this FBI behavior was unique. Now, he rescinded that argument in an email to me, basically, but that's not really relevant here, so... yeah, I mean, that's the argument he put forth, that the state was uniquely bad faith in this case. And that's really what I'm arguing against, is I'm saying, no, the state wasn't uniquely bad faith. It was acting in the exact same ways it always does. Now, if you want to go from there and say, should it act that way? Happy to have that conversation. Happy to do that with him or with anyone else. But yeah, I mean, that conversation isn't coming up, so... But no, I appreciate your feedback, but I would just have you note that no one is really interested in having that conversation. You might be. But in general, no one is interested in having that conversation. They'd rather dispute on partisan basis. So what I want to do is I want to say, this is right-wing propaganda. It has been used as left-wing propaganda or Democrat propaganda. We should dismiss both of these, and we should really just see the fact of the matter for what it is, and then we can have any discussion we want about the state. And I'm happy to do that. That's when my whole channel started, to talk about Bonapartism with Marxists, so I'm absolutely happy to do that. But that's not really the debate anyone's interested in. They're interested in calling me a Democrat hack because I didn't support the right-wing narrative, which is interesting. Yeah, so I understand your concern that like the focus is in the wrong place and that we would gain more from a conversation about the state. But I just don't think that was in the... The state wasn't necessarily uniquely bad faith, only relative to the partisan ideals. So I'm not sure what you mean by that. So, again, I don't think that anything about the ideals of the FBI are being infringed by them doing this. So I don't know what you mean by that, because it sounds like you're trying to uphold... I just don't understand, like, what ideals do you think are being voided? Now, if you want to make an... Just to be clear... if you want to make an argument that the liberal state as a category voids its ideals, again, through Bonapartism, like what Marx discusses, I'm totally happy to have that conversation. No disagreement. Well, no, I would probably disagree, but I would want to explore that, and I don't have like a solid, like, you can change my mind about, like, I'm not sure. Like, that's something I want to explore. But when you're saying that they violated their ideals, again, only in this one case, that just seems very questionable to me, because I would say that they violate their ideals as a rule. And then the question is, are they really violating those ideals? How do they do that? That's the question. But I'm not interested in this question of, like, how did they violate their ideals only this one time against Trump? That just seems absurd and partisan to me. Right, but this is what I'm saying. Like, Doug wasn't saying the state does this as a rule, and I'm saying the state does this as a rule, and you need to deal with it on that basis, right? So if you want to make the argument that there's something illiberal about the FBI functioning this way, the FBI functions this way all the time. This is how the FBI works. The problem is that when you start to say this is like, because Doug was really saying that the FBI doesn't operate this way. Remember, we argued about the FBI handbook. And remember, who is he upholding? Durham. Now, this is insane to me. Here's why. When you uphold Durham, what you're saying is, I support the FBI violating rules. I just think they should do it in the particular, violating ideals, sorry. I just think they should do it in the particular way that Durham says they should. Because do you think Durham is like he's upholding the liberal ideals in the FBI? Absolutely not. He's absolutely not. He's doing the same institutional FBI stuff, whatever. Which is why I said you don't actually agree with Durham. Why even talk about that? And yeah, so I just think, again, it's a very one-sided application of this critique. We're only talking about the liberal state failing to uphold its values in relation to Trump. We're not talking about how Trump is the most illiberal president in decades. We're not talking about that, because that's like Democrat propaganda or something. So we can't talk about both. Because I'm perfectly happy to have a conversation about the FBI being illiberal, but again, not when it's a defense of Trump entirely. I just don't understand the need for that. From either a Marxist perspective or a liberal perspective or anything, it's just very, it just comes off as very partisan. And I feel like there has to be like a bad faith, or not necessarily bad faith, but like a complete ignorance of like what we're really talking about with the one-sidedness. But yeah, I mean, if anyone else, I'll still respond to your messages if you have more, but anyone else is hanging out, I'm responding to questions, concerns, especially relating to the recent debate. You know, any of you who think I'm a partisan hack, let me know. Let me know. But yeah, I just think there really is a very selective critique here. And it's very much just aligned with Trump. Because again, like, we can talk forever about Trump's violations of the liberal order. Now, if a Marxist wanted to come to me and they wanted to say, listen, Trump is violating the liberal order, but so is the state necessarily. Or the state necessarily is violating liberal values as well, and so your problem can't just be Trump. Your problem has to be the state. And welcome to Marxism. Read Marx, right? And I would say, okay, fair critique. Let's do that. Let's get into that. Like, that's something I have to take up. I have to respond to that. That's interesting. I want to have that conversation. What's not interesting is someone who's supposedly Marxist just saying, hey, you have this critique of Trump as a liberal. Well, actually, Trump's the liberal one. Actually, kind of. And the state is violating its ideals only relative to Trump. And it's like, oh, okay. All right. Well, you have to substantiate that, and I don't think there's any substantiation of that except Republican propaganda, literally, just repeating talking points. Um, and, I take the talking points independently. I don't just dismiss them because they are talking points or whatever. But upon investigation, I don't find the talking points to be very good. I really think if we were on the same page about this, then Doug would have been like, "Oh yeah, of course the state does this all the time, and that's why let's talk about the state or something." But we didn't do that. We didn't talk about the state. We wanted to talk about Trump and whether Trump was specifically violated. But yeah, anyone who has any concerns, objections, I'm right here, live, for all questions and concerns.
I hear you.
Yeah, but I mean, when you say there's unresolved political motivations, I don't necessarily disagree with that, although I feel like you're implying that I'm a political actor and I'm a political hack, and Doug isn't, or something. If you think we both are politically motivated, okay, I guess. I disagree to the degree that, I'm politically biased. But if you're implying that I'm singularly biased, I would love for you to substantiate that. I think you need to substantiate that, perhaps. Like, the guy who's repeating the Russiagate narrative one-to-one with Trump is okay, but me, I'm not even, you guys have to remember, I'm not defending, like, the Democrat narrative. Like, I know that there were people at the time who made all sorts of wacky claims about Trump, and I know that, I mean, the average liberal will just say random things. The average liberal will just be like, yeah, Trump's a Russian puppet, I guess. I don't know. I mean, even now, like, with the Putin meeting or whatever, liberals are like, Putin controls him. And it's like, yeah, but no, like a little bit, yes, but no, not in the way that you think. So I'm really not sitting here. Again, I mean, really, just you have to listen to the argument on its own terms, without any preconceived notions of what we're talking about. And I think what you'll notice is that, I don't know. One of the things I'm interested in is kind of breaking through the political narratives about something and just like looking at it for what it is, because Republicans will do this thing where they're like, oh my god, look at this horrible thing that happened, and they're relying on you not understanding the underlying material. And to some degree, Democrats are relying on you not knowing the material as well, because they don't know the material and they're just using it for whatever they want to use it for. So what I'm trying to show is, if you actually look at the underlying material for like 2 seconds, it's like, oh yeah, the FBI just does this, and like they just did this, and they had a decent reason to do so, and it actually benefited both Trump and Clinton. It's very much an in-state activity, and it's being blown up because it's advantageous for them to do so. Okay, well, again, I would just want you to substantiate like the political assumptions that I've just described. Like, what about what I just said is political, rather than an actual like critique, or something of value there. I'm not trying to like, you haven't said anything crazy, so I'm not trying to come after you or anything, but I just think, again, like this is something very simple that's turned into like absolute mess, right? Um, yeah, it's turned into something it really does not need to be. And really, what's interesting is that, in my opinion, and I tried to make this point in the first half, I think going down this road of Russiagate and all this dodges the question of Bonapartism and the state. I think it actually dodges the important question. I think people like to tell me that I'm taking the wrong perspective or I'm missing things, but I actually think by taking this like kind of this this RussiaGate lens particularly, I think you're missing the point, because if you didn't take that lens, it would be very easy for you to just say, look, this is what the state does, how do you explain this? And you could do so from a perspective of actually understanding the state's activity and kind of an imminent critique, rather than just kind of making some generic populist, like empty, just like radical for the sake of being radical, like just something that's really not critical, something that's really not what I feel like we should be doing here, what I feel like Marxists should be doing, what I feel like, yeah, anyone who has something important to contribute, I feel like we have to be taking it more seriously than just, wow, Tulsi Gabbard said they investigated Trump and the evidence wasn't good. Yeah, but and this is another point I tried to make. You don't really have a civil right to not be investigated. People get investigated all the time for all sorts of different reasons. Now, the part where I think civil rights really come in a liberal framework is when you start infringing on that person's ability to exist. So, you know, when you do no-fly lists, right? Like during the terrorism era, they would investigate people they suspected of being radical, and then they would put them on a no-fly list, right? And so I would say the investigation was like, I mean, they're going to do that. But, you know, once you start like infringing on people's ability by putting them in prison, which this is why I made that crucial point that if they put Trump in prison for this instantly, or something like that, I would not support that at all. And another thing is that, you know, like the no-fly list, I wouldn't support that if there's not enough evidence. Investigations are just going to happen. Now, if you want to say that's ridiculous, that liberalism creates an order which requires the police state and investigations, we can talk about that. We can have a conversation about that. I'm very happy to have a conversation about that. But that's a different conversation than, I think, needlessly tangling these things together and saying that Trump's civil rights were violated. Because how? Because how? I mean, I don't think your civil rights are being violated if you're winning the election. You're just like living your life. You're just hanging out. Like, I don't think civil rights are being violated just because you were investigated. I mean, you have to remember, was Hillary Clinton's civil rights investigated because she was Secretary of State, and then they investigated her for like a long time over Benghazi and all of this? No. And then you could say, well, that's state activity, that's different. Sure. But I mean, these both contain interests of the state, and really, like, that was at issue. And I made this point, I don't know if people understand this. The investigation of George Papadopoulos was beneficial for Trump. It was beneficial, right? It's actually not good for the incoming President Donald Trump to have people in his orbit who are dealing with Russia that he doesn't know about, right? It's actually beneficial. There's a incredibly compelling need on behalf of the state to investigate that, even if they're pro-Trump. So I just don't buy, like, the investigation being the punishment. I just don't buy that at all. I just don't buy that. And that's fine if you feel that way, right? Like, at least you're being direct about that, and you're saying that's how you feel. I just don't agree with that, though. I just don't see that. I think like the state does this all the time. Like, again, like for terror watch lists, whatever. And we can have a conversation about that, whether they should be able to do that, or what does that really mean, or where does that come from. But that's a separate. We have to be like very direct about what we're talking about there. And then, what if you can't break through the mess? What do you do then? Not saying throw your hands up, but there's got to be some way of working from and with these hyper real bases. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't. I personally feel like I have a lot more successful of a time for seeing. I don't know. I mean, I all I ask, like, is that people make their principles and where they're coming from clear. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know, like, what people think liberalism means. But I'm sorry, but you can't just say that liberalism is just like libertarianism. It's a little bit more complicated than that. It is. It is more complicated than that. Liberalism is not just classical liberalism. Like, it's more. That is a huge important part of the tradition, but there's more to it than that. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you don't believe me, you don't believe me. But I don't think political biases are being avoided as much as they can be. And I don't think people can substantiate my bias. People just kind of what's another thing that's interesting is that no one has actually articulated to me where my bias lies at all. Like, they've never been able to say, I know you're biased because of this claim you make. They just say I'm biased because of the way I sound. Something about the way I come across or the points I'm making they think sounds like a Democrat, so they're like, okay, you're a Democrat and you're biased and you're a clown. And it's like, okay, um, I need you to articulate it's more than that. I'm sorry. I do. Did we really? Okay, great game. Great, fantastic. I need you to. I would really love to, because I can articulate why I think Doug is biased. Right. I would say that the fact that he is making such a big deal out of the deep state doing what I would believe is normal activity requires you to have a suspension of belief that where you suspend it and you just sort of take the narrative for whatever reason. But no one's been able to point out where I'm doing that. But yeah, back to your point about the investigation being the punishment. I just don't buy that. I mean, the liberal state has been doing this for its entire existence. It's a law. It's really law and order, right? I mean, you have to be able to control your population, and like the question is like, is that justified? I mean, people usually want to be defended from terrorist attacks, so there's usually like a democratic origin of that behavior. But I mean, at the same time, it can't be like unlimited police state. That becomes illiberal, surely. The liberal state only does that in capital, so I'm not convinced of that. But like again, I'm perfectly happy to have that argument, right? Like if you truly think, but again, you're making my point, right? If you truly think that the liberal state is doing that because of capital, then let's talk about that. That would be a more interesting conversation. Let's talk about how the liberal state does this. It investigates people, it surveils people, it violates its own ends. And if you think it only does that because of capital, then let's talk about that. How does that work? Why do we think that? That's a really interesting conversation to me. I'd be way more happy to have that conversation. But the problem is that when you aren't having the argument on that level and you start saying it's a particular problem about Trump, then we're not having a conversation about capitalism. We're having a conversation about partisan politics, right? And like, was that actually true? And I would argue, no, it's not true. And yeah, I mean, it wasn't talked enough about in the conversation. Absolutely. I mean, again, I would be a lot more interested in having a conversation about the liberal state, and because I mean, Marx basically gestures at the idea. There's a section in his journalism where he like quotes the French Constitution, and he says, well, they violated this part here and they violated this part this time. And so yeah, Marx seems to be very interested in how the liberal state contradicts itself. As someone who is clearly Marx is clearly sympathetic to the liberal ideas, but he's just saying like these are not being lived up to. And to the extent that that problem can be attributed to capitalism, that's a really interesting question, and that's like the whole point of Marxism, really. So I'm happy to have that debate. That's a worthwhile conversation. I just don't. I guess I don't think that Doug is interested in having that conversation. I don't think that's really where his mind is at. I just don't think it is. I'm sorry. I think he's more at a partisan, one-sided. I think that's really where his mind is at. That's what he prefers to talk about. I don't think he actually wants to talk about how capital does this. I don't think he actually cares. I think he cares about the how it's uniquely applied to Trump. Big word, encompassing and easy to blame, like capitalism. Yeah, exactly. Liberalism is a very complicated historical phenomenon, and it's really the modern state. And you can't separate it from all of its modern characteristics and say that that's like fake liberalism, right? I mean, you have to really deal with it as it exists. But you should also be able to take up criticisms that are imminent and say things like the liberal ideals say this, and then the modern state is like, you should be able to take those criticisms up without saying, oh, this is like false liberalism or something. Partisan politics is capitalism. The whole scope of the issue isn't comprehended. I mean, I don't really disagree with that. I mean, I would just disagree if you think that's my fault, I guess. Because I think I'm perfectly capable of having this conversation, as I've articulated here, about the nature of the state, the nature of the police state. And actually, Rudy and I had a live conversation, for those of you who saw it, before the Doug conversation. And I think Rudy was actually interested in this conversation. I think he was genuinely interested in what is the modern state, how is it contradictory, how does it do things like police state and censorship, how does it have a censorship and police state apparatus. He was interested in that question, and so I was very interested in having that conversation with him, and that's really cool. And like that's also a lot more difficult to resolve. But if we're gonna take this like partisan, thing, then we're gonna take it up on the terms of that debate. So I just don't think, I don't know. It's fine and bourgeois to point out how the state breaks its promises. I mean, I just don't think that Russiagate is the state breaking its promises, unless you're saying the FBI per se is breaking the state's promises. So that's my problem, because when you say that the Russiagate is breaking the state's promises, again, what you're really implying is that, or saying directly, is that Trump was uniquely targeted and uniquely promises were broken regarding Trump. And I just don't agree with that. I think if you want to, I just think that's not true. I mean, and again, I'm waiting for someone to justify that to me. Because again, no one is really taking up the argument of how promises were uniquely violated in the case of Trump. And I think that Doug tried to make that argument. I think he failed to do that. But as for the argument about whether the state breaks its promises at all, again, I've said over and over again, perfectly happy with that conversation. The promise of civilian government, I mean, that exists. Civilian government exists. That's just a fact. That's just a fact that it exists. Now, is it compromised by capitalism? Probably, possibly. But civilian government is just a fact. It's just a fact of the matter. The government is run by civilian bureaucrats who are civilians, and they live in I'm not convinced that the existence of like an elite class means it's not a civilian government. I think people like to have this idea that like Trump, I don't know if you're implying this, but people have this idea, I've heard Chris basically say this, that Trump is a more civilian government than the deep state, and no, I'm sorry. To the extent that the bureaucrats are not civilian, Trump is not civilian. I mean, it's just really simple. Trump does not break through the problem of civil control of government at all. But I would argue that the government is civilly controlled. It's just that's like a mediated form of civil control that could be contradicted by capitalism and hugely problematic. So don't mistake me saying civilian control is like, it's perfect and democratic. It's not the point. The point is that it's a mediated, justified form of civilian control that needs to be resolved on its own terms, not on the terms of a populist, rant about how the state unfairly applied its terms to one guy. I just don't think those are the terms with which we can use to understand the state. No, they're elites. I mean, come on. J.D. Vance, he went to Harvard or Yale? I don't remember. He went to an Ivy League. All his friends are like Peter Thiel, rich billionaires. Like he's elite. I don't know how you can delude yourself into thinking. Sorry, I don't mean to be okay. Just so everyone knows, I can be aggressive towards you without like having a personal problem with you. So unrelated, okay. But I think it's ridiculous to say JD is not elite. That's ridiculous. He was a senator. He was Harvard. The thing about being an elite in America is that being an elite is somewhat it's somewhat changing. I mean, you can become an elite in a generation. You can. Now, does that mean that the elites don't exist and they don't matter? No, of course not. We need to have a conversation about what being an elite is and how that comes from. But yeah, not from birth. That doesn't matter though. That's what I'm saying. Like being an elite is something that is transitory. Like it happens over time, and people can become elite in generation. Absolutely. That doesn't make them not elite. That doesn't make them any different. We might have more sympathy, but I don't think that one of them is more civilian. I don't think there's some form of like corrupted consciousness that arises from being an elite that only applies to the people who are elite from birth. I think that's a little bit too much like class determinism or something, which is not sufficient to what the problem we have. Because J.D. Vance, he operates and thinks like an elite. He does. And to the extent that he has problems running the state, it's going to be it's one of those things like where one of the problems with like the liberal order is that when you start running the state, you become assimilated to the state and the state's logic, right? So no matter how much of an outsider you are, and I really don't think J.D. Vance is that much of an outsider, but to the extent that you are an outsider, you're going to get assimilated to the state's logic. That's just how it works. And I just don't think, yeah, I don't think there's a difference between upward mobility and the club. I think you become part of the club through upward mobility. Absolutely. I mean, the elite in America has changed over time substantially, right? I mean, we would all agree with that, wouldn't we? I mean, the elite, like there was a time when the elite was, you know, the golden era, like all the car company guys, oil oligarchs or whatever. Like that's just not the case anymore. Those are not the people who run America's government. So the elite changes over time. And I don't think it's like a super long, drawn-out process. Or, but yeah, just to be clear, you weren't arguing that. Just to be clear, though, I mean, I think Chris Catrone would make that argument, which is why I would bring it up, because I think it's relevant to, you know, people I've spoken to and people on here. But that's just not a delineation I would care to draw. I mean, fair enough. Yeah, you might not care to draw that. But again, like I'm perfectly happy to have a conversation about how civilian control of the government is mediated and falsified in capitalism or something like that. Like that's interesting to me. But I'm just not interested in how that only applies to Trump. Trump versus the law might be a necessary form of the contradiction of the state and society. Maybe, but I don't think that contradiction is unique to Trump or like targeted towards Trump or like I don't know. I don't think Trump is like an exception to. I don't think he's like a. I don't know. He's not like a scapegoat. I don't like this idea that Trump is this like poor wounded figure, but yeah, I mean that might be a necessary thing. He's civilian like how Elon is limping. I don't know about that, but Nixon didn't feel that way. Well, I don't know about. I mean, when we say feel that way, I don't know what we mean by feel that way. Like Nixon. So Nixon's like my favorite president. Not in terms of policy, but in terms of like just as an interest. And so I would say I'm familiar with Nixon. And I mean, the thing about Nixon is like he might not have felt that way. And I do appreciate about Nixon. What I like about Nixon is that he approaches problems in his own perspective, but he does so in the interests of the state, in a liberal manner, right? That's really what he's interested in. He doesn't break through any civilian problems. I mean, if you think one of the problems with the state is that it is corrupt, Nixon did Watergate. Now, whatever like Nixon apologia we want to do about Watergate, that's not him breaking the corruption of the government. That's him trying to wield it for his own ends, right? That's not like that's not like civilian control. I just don't buy that argument. Or the way that he tried to. I mean, Nixon did have like an authoritarian strain. And it was in service of the idea that he could commandeer the state for its own ends. He really wasn't interested in like civilian control. He was interested in what was the most effective way to run the state, which is kind of an example of like getting assimilated to the state's own logic and all of that. And I just don't think there's something like I just don't think there's much to learn from there, other than that. The only point I would make about that I would agree with you on, the only thing that I would agree with you all on, maybe if this is something you would say, I do think there's something about the elite class, a particular kind of elite class person, whose consciousness has kind of decayed because all they're interested in is like the form of the state, but not the content, we could say. And so they're essentially upholding this like idea without dealing with it substantively. Whereas Nixon was dealing with the content, right? I mean, he was dealing with like, what can I actually do? What is my role? The form of the state was the same, I would say, but there is something sympathetic in Nixon in that he was actually dealing with the content of the office instead of like this deep state complacency type situation. And I'm just not sure that Trump is a figure like that at all. I don't think Trump is a figure who's breaking through the complacency of the deep state. I think he is doing so in a way that is dumber than the deep state itself. And yeah, I just think it's very unremarkable in that way. But it is important to discuss in like how can the liberal state create people like Biden and Nixon and Trump? Like how does it feature all these different figures? What do they have in common? What are they different in? What is the problem of the state itself? What are the principles that are violated? It's just kind of a complicated question that I'm interested in. I am interested in that question. But I feel like when we put it in terms of like this guy is civilian and I align with him because he's not an elite, and I don't know, I get. Yeah, so writing an article, I've actually been thinking about writing an article. I'm not sure what it would be about. It would, maybe there'd be value in making like a very specific argument like that. I was kind of thinking I would write an article about everything I've been thinking, and then maybe from there I can write more specific articles. But just to like kind of like put myself out there and say some controversial things about like sort of my podcast so far and some of the episodes. I was thinking about writing an article like that. But yeah, or I could do something more specific afterwards, or only something more specific. I was thinking about that. I don't think Doug would be interested in publishing me on Sublation. I don't know. I don't think that would happen. I'm not sure about that one. So I was just thinking I'd write it on like Substack or something and put it out there and post it on my account for those of you who are interested. But I am not sure. I'm not sure how many people would be interested in that. So no, you don't know. I'll just put it this way: you guys don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see what happens in the next few days. If I decide to start writing an article, I'll think about asking him about it, and we'll see what happens. Okay, well, I'll try just for you, okay? I'll try in some form, I'll try. If I decide to write an article. But yeah, I was thinking I would write an article about, I really wanted to write an article about the Daniel Tutt conversation, and maybe about philosophy, and also just like what I'm doing at the podcast in general. And I just kind of want to, I understand that like it's going to be too broad and abstract and confusing. But I think that might be a good place to start, just so people can kind of see where I'm coming from in writing and deal with it that way. And then from there I can write more specific, actual, topical, coherent articles if there's interest. But I do think it would be interesting to be like, drop something that's kind of provocative, actually, kind of in the Chris Catrone style of dropping a provocative piece. That's something like what I would want to do, just to see where it goes. But it is what it is. Sometimes there's drama. Sometimes that's one of my frustrations, and I don't want to get into all the details, but there's it's unfortunate that conversations like this can't happen without devolving and regressing into accusations and Yeah, I think I mentioned this in my stream last night, but it's very frustrating to me that people can be sympathetic to my project when I'm like very passive and I'm very good faith, and that's like a legitimate side to me. But then as soon as I start to assert some things or affirm like a specific worldview, people are like, "How dare you? You're not allowed to do that." I'm very upset right now, and it's like, okay, um, don't compare yourself. Well, listen, I did compare myself, and I stand by my comparison. I wasn't comparing myself. I was just saying that format would be something similar to what I would try to do. So I will. I stand by my statement. Okay. You should be grateful. Okay, I'm following your suggestion. I really don't think I'm getting published anytime soon, but we'll see. But yeah, if anyone has, we had our brief back and forth here. If anyone else is hanging out and has questions, concerns, do you want to debate me? Want to tell me that I'm brain dead? I would highly recommend anyone who's here, like, listen, guys, if you want to hear a more constructive, positive assertion of what I believe, check out the stream from last night. It's a good, it's good. We talked about Hegel, we talked about AI, we talked about philosophy. I think I don't know. I hope people will see the full picture for what it is, rather than you're a partisan hack. Appreciate everyone who dropped in here and put their thoughts out there, though. We don't have any particularly angry, aggressive critiques. I haven't been called a puppet enough times, which is unfortunate, a little disappointing. But that's okay. Maybe they don't want to put out their critiques in a public forum. It's okay, or a more public direct response forum, I guess. I mean, I personally would like to be on good terms with Doug, and I would have liked to discuss with him more on this topic, maybe in a way where we'd be able to cut through some of the sidestepping or the particulars of this case, and I'd be happy to do all of that. But if it doesn't happen, my intentions are my thoughts on that are known at least. I don't know if I should leave this one up there for people to watch. I guess I can. I don't really want to be too much of a live streamer, but maybe this would be of interest. It's quite sad. I got to be honest with you. I totally agree with you. I totally agree with your defense here. um, yeah, I mean, I try to assume that people are acting in good faith. I understand, like, getting to a certain point where it's like, yeah, there's probably not good faith, but generally I think that someone's operating in good faith for a really long time, generally. Like, I give people a lot of credit. So I think it's unfortunate that people are, um, I think it's unfortunate that people are accusing me of that so quickly. But it's really to be expected. I mean, I shouldn't take it too seriously because people are just going to do that, I guess. And I just hope that there's a few people who say otherwise to keep my faith. Do I assume that Doug is acting in good faith? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Doug is like compromised, I guess. Um, but not in like a bad faith manner. I just think that I don't think he's dealing with his ideals clearly or correctly, I guess. But I think the place he's coming from is in good faith. I again, um, although I do have some problems that are more personal and dramatic and stuff that again I don't want to get into too much. But in terms of how he operates and what he's interested in. I think he's good faith. Yeah, I mean he might be misled or something, but I think he's absolutely in good faith. Happening. I mean, it's mostly YouTube comments. You can see some of them, but also a lot of them get removed, and so you won't see them. If you look at like the amount of comments on the video, it won't match up with the amount of comments you can see. I have no idea how to fix that. Like, I genuinely have no idea. Like, YouTube seems to like auto hide comments on a questionable basis. I don't even know why they're getting hid. And then I'll respond to them and talk to those people, but it won't like show up still. So I like you're not actually seeing some of the comments. I don't know how to fix that at all. It's nothing too bad. It's just a few too many comments that are like you're a liberal partisan or you're a fake liberal or something, and it's like, okay, I mean, sure, I guess. I got called a clown in one comment. That was a good one. But I mean, it's pretty split. I mean, I think half the people are on my side, half the people are not, and then there's a few people who are kind of just there for the ride, not particularly on either side, and that's good. That's all good. This guy in my game is having a breakdown, I think. Don't play online games, guys. Don't do that. Don't play online games, kids. It's not good. Nothing on Twitter, though, no. I don't... No one's on my Twitter. No one pays attention to my Twitter. It's probably for the best. It's not a good place. You're right. Not a good place either. All right, yeah, appreciate it. Hope you have a good rest of your day. Appreciate you hanging out. I'll wait a couple minutes for any other questions, concerns, arguments, and then otherwise I'll end stream. Still haven't decided if I should keep this up or not, but we'll see. Any questions, comments, aggressive articulations of things, let me know. Post them in the chat. I'd be happy to hear. It's also possible that people just don't... Well, anyway. Yeah, any other questions, concerns, arguments? Gotcha questions. Anything you got? Okay, this guy is he may be mentally unwell, but he's good at the game. I gotta hand it to him. Okay, I threw the game. Okay. Any other questions, concerns? Last call. I'm going to give it 2 minutes. Any really sick gotcha questions that are going to destroy my career? The puppies represent my YouTube comments. In case anyone's wondering what they're for. They're just there. Don't worry about it too much. This guy just one-shots them. That's crazy. Alright. Well, appreciate everyone being here. All the comments, thoughts I got. Yeah, I'm just hanging out just to see if anyone has... Why... What? This guy... Okay. Okay. Yeah, anyone has very final, true last call for anyone who has any questions, concerns, debate propositions, gotcha questions, anything really sick like that, let me know. Any thoughts? Okay, my chat just like showed me all of your comments at the same time, so I wasn't ignoring it, my bad. Lighting, listen, I don't know how to do lighting, I don't care. Suffer. I don't know. I don't know how to fix that. I'm not playing WoW right now, actually. But... I like World of Warcraft. Fun game, you know? I used to play it with some people, and it was an exciting experience. There was some drama. And yeah, it's a good game. It's enjoyable. I like raiding. Doom Scroll. No, actually, so last night I mentioned that I got my introduction to Daniel Tutt and Chris Catrone through Catherine Liu, and I saw her on Doom Scroll. So Doom Scroll was actually my introduction to the left in a way, like the more real left. Now that I was really interested in Doom Scroll and Citarella at the beginning, but I do think now that I've learned more about the left, I am very unsatisfied with what they've got going on there. I mean, I think he has some good guests, like Vivek Chibber. Chibber's good. He's interesting. Not perfect, but he's interesting. But then, yeah, too much of the fixation on the anti-woke stuff is just like it's just very irritating. It's very much like, okay, I get it. Like it's yes, wokeism is a bit. Wokeism is a bit excessive. Like, okay, but what is the left? Like, are we going to talk about leftism, or like what's going on? Like it's a bit much. I think they need to chill. And I think it's just generally it's a more empty podcast. There's not a lot of substance there sometimes, which is a bit frustrating. So I'm not a huge fan. But I mean, it was an introduction. It's good. There's some good episodes on there. I haven't seen the Derek Varn one. I should watch that. That would be interesting. That would actually be interesting. So I should check that out. I'll make a note of that. I'll put it in here. I only recently found out that exists, and I was like, oh, that's crazy. This guy's... Okay. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I saw it on Varn's. Yeah, I was looking through Varn's stuff, and I was like, "Oh, that's crazy." So, my God, it's like 3 hours too. Theory Underground. I know they had some Um, I mean they had some drama. I definitely don't like. I don't know. There's kind of a weird. I don't know. I don't like the obsession over the project and the goal and like the aims of it. I don't know. It's a bit much for me. It's a bit much for me. It's a bit much. And in terms of time energy, I'm not sure. I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting. I think I watched. I think the most interesting thing I watched about that was a Chris Catrone one where they were kind of like talking past each other a bit, um, and that was a bit frustrating because I do think there's a point to what I do think there's a point to that idea, um, but I also think it can kind of miss the point and be trying to reinvent itself when it's unnecessary. So yeah, I mean, I'm interested in it. I'm not completely dismissive of it, but I'm not. I don't. As you can tell, I don't have a lot of specific thoughts on it because I'm not. I haven't investigated it deeply. I'm not big on like theory for the sake of theory, because it gets a little bit too abstract and like self-congratulatory and isolated and all of that. So I do have kind of an eye for like what I think is really going to affect world history or something like that. Whatever, something more. But then again, what I'm doing is still fairly isolated, so it is what it is. But they're interesting. I just I don't know enough to. Although I would like to know more about the drama, to be honest with you. I'd like to know the backstory behind that because that's interesting. This guy's trying to dox me or something. Um, the weirdest game. Okay. Yeah, appreciate your bonus questions. I was literally about to end stream and then my page just refreshed with like your posts, so that was wild. Like I got owned. Yeah, I'm really interested in that 3-hour Varn conversation. Have a good night. It's the middle of the day for me. Are you European? I didn't see your post. If you're still here, I didn't see your post about Nickland, so I apologize for not answering that. In case you left already, I feel pretty bad about that. I don't know why it's like updating delayed. But thoughts on Nickland? I mean, yeah, it's a little bit too. I don't like the free city. I don't like that. I don't like that. I really don't like the like doomer capitalist monarch. Like these people are very disturbing to me. Like I really hate them. Um, I just have a really intense dislike towards this kind of like reactionary um, doomerism, pessimism. I don't know. I don't know much about his ideas specifically, but I know that it basically is kind of like a humanity will necessarily destroy itself through like gathering information, and we're going to necessarily destroy ourselves. And that's like okay, I guess. Um, I mean, I'm a very pessimistic person. I'm just not very convinced by grand narratives like that. I think it's too much of a. I think it really is kind of like a grand narrative where it's trying to tell a story about humankind that's comforting in its own way. And I just don't think I don't think any grand narrative like that is going to describe history. I don't think that's how things are going to turn out. But that's about it. Yeah, that's not surprising to me. I would still say it's just reactionary insanity, though, because I mean those leftist types. I mean a lot of leftists. I mean we should be clear about this, right? We should be clear about this. A lot of leftists are just like reactionary radicals, basically, and they're just like reacting in a radical, empty sense. I really don't like those kinds of people. They're like the opposite of me, and so it's not surprising that someone like that can come from a lefty position. Is Mark Fisher? He's the guy who wrote like about capitalist realism. I think that's the book that Daniel Tutt said I should read. I haven't read it, but I don't know. I'm interested in the argument because it does accurately describe kind of the position I'm coming from, but I don't know how good the argument is. So interesting, but not surprising. I mean, famously, like Mussolini was like a leftist. You know, I do think it's a big problem the left has that it basically just ends up being radicals a lot of the time. But without substance. Slow cancellation of the future. Okay, I don't know. I'm not familiar with that one. Let me look that up briefly. Oh, okay. It's about that. Gotcha. That is an interesting concept. That is an interesting concept. I'd be interested to hear what his argument is about that. On the slow cancellation of the future. Okay. Theory Underground did a great piece on Nick Land with some guests, a philosopher that Nick Zizek knows. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah. I'm not sure if they're taking him more seriously than he should be taken, though. I don't know. Again, I think I worry about it being too much like a story, like I mentioned, like kind of like a convenient story. I think a lot of political beliefs are stories, maybe all, and that's pretty concerning. Like an observation I've made is that conspiracy theorists are they just love the story. They're like actually addicted to it. Like they actually love it. Like they'll tell you like the most horrible story ever heard, but they actually love it. Like they're excited by the fact that that story could exist. And that's something that I have, again, a big skepticism towards. Not a big fan of that. Major thing that he misses is video games. Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know if anyone. Video games are interesting, right? Because I think video games are ignored for like I think video games are pretty empty of meaning in a lot of ways that people won't accept. But also, that's not necessarily the case, and they still, as a huge part of our society, necessarily have an impact, even if that's on a questionable basis. Like I always say, like there's like two games with good writing that exist. So as an art form, video games are questionable. But then there's the experiential aspect of video games that give them like a, I guess, artistic quality that other forms of media can't have, regardless of how poor the writing might be or whatever. So yeah, it's an interesting question. I guess what I'm getting at is I'm not sure that anyone like pro or anti video game can really tackle it fairly. because I feel like people are too. It's too dogmatic. Like you either think video games are cool or you think they're a waste of time and horrible. What do you mean all you, bro? You need to chill, okay? This guy in my game, sorry. Yeah, Moldbug, I think you're talking about... Bro, I did like 30,000 more damage than you, okay? You need to relax, okay. Yeah, Disco Elysium is exactly what I'm talking about when I said there's like two good games with writing. Or just two games with good writing. Disco Elysium is one of the only games with good writing. It's not even like the best writing of all time, but it's like one of the only games with good writing. So that's one of my favorite games because of that. Moldbug, I think, is what's his name? Well, I forgot his name already, but I know him by his real name. I think I brought him up to Chris in the recent episode. But yeah. Wait, they dropped a trailer. I didn't hear about that. Hold on, we're getting. Oh my God, you're my favorite chatter now. Let's see what this is. Was it at Gamescom? I'm not watching that, but I'm sure there's some great. I'm sure there's some great announcements that I'm missing. I'm at the state of my life where I just like read a list of announcements after it's over. That's what I do. So was that where it was at, or I don't know, I haven't seen that. What's that company called? It's like, here we go. I'll find it. I thought the company like died and like fell apart or something though. And like I think the main creators of Disco Elysium left the company. So that's a bit concerning. Oh, this was 5 months ago? Oh, okay. Interesting. Espionage RPG Project C4. Well, that's very descriptive. Yeah, the original developers, writers aren't there anymore, so that's unfortunate. Oh, brand new. Okay, well now. Oh, okay. Zero parades. Interesting. Okay. Okay, I see. I had to look down 2 pages. My bad. My bad. Media literacy moment. Okay, this looks very questionable, but hopefully it's good. I'm worried about it because they don't have the original writers, and this looks like I don't know. We'll see. I'm interested. I'll cautiously optimistic, with the emphasis on cautious. I'm looking for the World of Warcraft info, guys. That's what I'm here for. All right, but yeah, appreciate you being here. Great chat, great chatter. You drop me important information. Even though you're European, but that's okay. I've got some European fans. That's how it goes. I think I'm gonna end stream for the day. But happy to talk to different people. Happy to talk to you guys. Appreciate you all being here. Appreciate you watching. And yeah, you too. You have a good night. And yeah, I'll see you all next time in the future.